The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
It's BYU. It's Texas Tech. It is a top 10 showdown in Lubbock.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you guys that tomorrow's game is absolutely gargantuan for BYU. It is history for the BYU football program. It'll be their first ever time being a ranked top 10 team facing off against a fellow top 10 ranked team. In fact, it's actually pretty rare air for a program like Texas Tech as well, because the last time that Lubbock, speaking of Texas Tech, had college game day in town was 2008 when Number One Texas traveled there. Remember the Michael Crabtree game when Texas Tech upset them? Well, that was the first time in their history they had a top 10 showdown. And the very next week, they faced off against a top 10 ranked Oklahoma State squad. And since then, they have not played in a similar type matchup. So both of these programs are relative newcomers to the territory that they are participating in, but I don't think that's going to slow these two teams from absolutely throwing haymakers at one another. I am super, super excited for this game. I have been waiting all week to see it all play out, and I've done a number of different media appearances across the country, some in Texas, some nationwide, some local in Utah, and the prevailing sentiment is that there are a lot of people out there believe that it's in the Big 12's best interest if BYU loses this game. Let's Texas Tech and them get back on a collision course for Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game. And then BYU, in theory, gets their revenge down there in Arlington, thereby clinching the automatic college football playoff berth, but also seeing a program like Texas Tech at 11-1, likely also in the at-large conversation, if not outright clinching an at-large bid into the college football playoff, to take the Big 12 at least multiple teams in. Now, there is a program up the road from BYU, speaking of Utah, who they kind of need BYU to win out, to be quite frank. And there are other scenarios that Utah, being 13th in the country right now, according to the college football playoff rankings, could not need to play in the title game to get into the college football playoff, but the simple fact of life is BYU's up against it in this game. And I'm also of the opinion that BYU is being seriously devalued yet again when it comes to this matchup. For the life of me, I have been struggling all week long to understand that why our friends at FanDuel and other sports books out there have had BYU as big of a 10.5 point underdog in this game. Yeah, sure. Playing in Lubbock is one thing. That's absolutely going to give Texas Tech a little bit of an edge there. Is it the new uniforms that Texas Tech is donning? Well, BYU, to their credit, they're wearing new helmets with that Sailor Coug logo on the side that I'm absolutely in love with. I love that logo, and I love the fact it's going to be featured prominently in this game. Is it the fact that they think that Texas Tech is a machine and BYU is a bit of a paper tiger? Maybe that's the case. But all BYU has done this season is prove time and time again, as evidenced by their 8-0 record. If you want to go back to extend it back to last season, 19-2 over the last 21 games, they have shown a propensity to find ways to win football games no matter what the circumstances and no matter what happens to them in said games. There is an uncanny feeling around this BYU football program that they just won't be denied. I have used it often and said this often on this podcast for those of you who are everydayers, and I hope you all are, that a lot of times BYU understands that betting lines are there to entice bettors to bet on said games. They may be a little more outlandish, but this one feels like it's a little too large. And there's something that the odds makers out there know that you, I, and anybody else out there who may be Joe Schmo fan doesn't know. I think BYU is absolutely capable of winning this game. And what's it going to take? Well, it's going to take a lot because you're going to need a guy like LJ Martin who's going to give it a go. We'll see how he looks early on in this game. And you got to see him kind of shrug off, to use the expression, his shoulder issue and say, I'm fine now. I had a conversation with a BYU player not that long ago, and they essentially told me, actually, it's a former BYU player, I should clarify that. It's not a current player, but did play at BYU, who indicated they had multiple shoulder injuries during their time in Provo. And their whole thought process was that when the adrenaline gets pumping, when you finally kick that ball off, you're in the middle of a game, you don't feel much of anything because, as he mentioned, the adrenaline's flowing. And we have seen some pretty impressive studies that adrenaline is an absolutely incredible thing that can help people overcome some pretty significant issues to play and perform at their best. That's what you hope for a guy like LJ Martin in this game, that he goes into it, may not be feeling 100%, but he gets out there, the juices get flowing, and all of a sudden he's like, you know what? Let's go. Let's get this thing done. It's going to be imperative that BYU has to be able to manufacture some rushing offense. It may not be to the same level that they've had up until the Iowa State game. So when they went into Iowa State, they were top 10 in the country in average rushing yards per game. I think it was a shade over 230 yards on average. If BYU gets to 230 yards against this Texas Tech defense, they will have absolutely obliterated the Red Raiders. They will be a blowout if BYU gets anywhere near that number. I will say that on the record right now. But I also don't expect that from BYU in this game. This is a game you're going to have to use a little more of what they call smoke and mirrors to generate some of that rushing offense. Cody Hagan, Parker Kingston on fly sweeps. You're going to need to use the short to intermediate passing game out in the flats with guys like a Preston Rex as an extension of the rushing attack to get you those yards that are going to keep Texas Tech honest in terms of their defensive alignment. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot afford, if you're BYU, to have guys like David Bailey, Lee Hunter, Jacob Rodriguez. They have a who's who, it feels like, of a front seven that is going to probably be NFL talent in the next NFL draft or successive drafts after that. They've got a ton of talent up front, and they are going to come after Bear Bachmeier. The one thing I love about Bear Bachmeier is another key to this game is that Bear Bachmeier has been absolutely unflappable this season. He loves playing the game of football. He carries himself with it's not an arrogance, it's just a quiet confidence is probably the best way to describe it. But he knows that he belongs at this level. And to have led BYU to a sterling 8-0 record and a number 7 national ranking as a true freshman, the future looks very, very bright for him. But this is the toughest opponent to date by a fair margin, if not a wide margin. Nothing against Utah, nothing against Iowa State or anybody else that BYU has played this season. None of them hold a candle to what Texas Tech is capable of in this game. And a guy like Bear Bachmeier, he's got to be on his absolute best. He's got to be his absolute best, I should say, to help BYU win this game. Is he capable of that? I absolutely believe he is capable of it, but he needs the guys around him to step up. He needs his receivers to get themselves open and catch that ball when it comes their way. There cannot be drops. He needs guys like LJ Martin, Preston Rex, whoever else is in the backfield alongside him. They need to cover that football up. He himself needs to avoid getting this ball punched out because Texas Tech, the way they generate turnovers is they punch the ball. They strip you a lot, and you have to avoid that. And most importantly, in my mind, for BYU in this game, that offensive line has got to have its best performance to date. Isaiah Jota, Waylon Lapuaho, Bruce Mitchell, Kyle Saforchuk, Austin Leusa, Sonny Mocassini, Andrew Gentry. That's the 8-9-man rotation, essentially, that's been BYU's offensive front this season. They've got to play and perform at their absolute best this week. If they do that, they will give BYU a fighting chance. If they don't, well, you may find yourself once again looking at that collision course and hoping that you can rebound against TCU a week from tomorrow and get back into the win column and keep that dream alive of facing off for a second time against the Red Raiders in Arlington, Texas. So crazy situation. College game day in town. Students have been camping out for well over a week at this point down there in Lubbock, and it's going to be an absolutely electric, raucous atmosphere down there at Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock, Texas. I, for one, wish I was going to be able to be there, but I am not. But looking forward to it all the same, and it is a big opportunity staring BYU in the face.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick. It's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Running it back. Luke Fickell will be the Wisconsin Badgers coach in 2026.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
Chris McIntosh, Wisconsin Badgers athletic director, released a statement today confirming what I think a lot of people thought was already happening. Luke Fickell will be the Wisconsin Badgers football head coach in 2026. I think I want to just start with a couple of the statements here. This is from, and this was according to a report by ESPN and Varsity Connect with Jesse Temple. Always want to give sources. He said, Chancellor Mnuchin and I are aligned on significantly elevating investment in our program to compete at the highest level, McIntosh said. We are willing to make an investment in infrastructure and staff, as important as our ability to recruit and retain talent. And more there to, if you're subscribed to Varsity Connect, go check out what Jesse Temple's doing. But the big and short of it is Luke Fickell is the coach next year. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin so far, 15-19 overall, obviously 2-6 this year, winless in the Big Ten. This is something I've thought, and if you've been listening to the show, this really shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. I thought this is where this was going. I have continued to say, if there are positives you can find here if you want to. Again, I completely understand if people were out and they want change and they're frustrated. I'm frustrated. I've been a lifelong Badger fan that's trying to turn my 11-year-old son into a Badger fan. Winning would help on that front. I think the biggest positive you take out of this is there is investment coming. There is money coming into the program. And I think that investment is going to be there regardless of whoever the coach is. But if you're somebody that was just out and you're somebody that wanted this program to move on, this is probably a frustrating day, and I get that. We got people jumping in the chat already. Let's get a couple of these comments in here. Uncultured Barbarian, great old friend of the show, talking about this is just a money thing. Kurt says he may be coming back, but when the booster money dries up and the stadium is empty, McIntosh will be looking for his job as well. Jay Daly says, let's go. Mitch says, zigging when everyone else is zagging. Obviously, a lot of coaching movement this offseason. Zach Bartz, man, good friend of the show, says, now I hope they lose every game by 30+. See, I love Zach. I love Zach. Zach's great people. I just am never going to be there. I still think they can be competitive against Washington. I think they can pull some stuff out. Let me give you a couple reasons. I'm going to give you one thing about this that really frustrates me too. Like something about this that really rubs me the wrong way. And maybe it's just a me thing. But let me give you a couple reasons why, maybe if you're looking for reasons why this makes sense, why it could work, let me give you a couple. The first is, again, I think the money investment is real. Judging from what Chris McIntosh has said, they're going to be putting more money into the program. That's needed regardless of who the coach is. Whether you are moving on or not, that money investment is absolutely needed. They're going to be putting that into the program. That's a big deal. Again, regardless of who's at the helm of the cruise ship, you got to put the right engines in the ship, and you got to have the right money and the right investment to do that. So I think that's a big deal. I think there is an element of if you want to bank on the young talent on this team, the 24 and the 25 classes, players that have started to already show some things in Wisconsin. If you want to bank on that talent and some of the pieces in this 26 recruiting class, keeping this staff together keeps those players intact. And it's really been one of the things we talked about a lot with this coaching staff is its ability to recruit, its ability to develop talent. That's a big part of this, right? Maybe you keep that roster together. If you keep this coaching staff together, there's a chance that if you blow it all up, you're starting all over 2026. Maybe it becomes a longer rebuild. Why not see if Luke Fickell for sure is the guy or not, right? For sure can or can't do it with a little bit more money. And if he does, then it's an easier path to rebuilding with him because he's already got his pieces here, if that makes sense. But I also get it. I also get the frustration. Like, I get fans being ticked off. I get this team looking as bad as it is and looking around the landscape of college football and seeing all these other programs making moves. And it feels like Wisconsin is getting left behind. It feels like if you're looking at it from that narrative, Wisconsin isn't as serious as a Florida or a Florida State or, certainly Penn State, right? Some of these schools that have moved on, LSU, from high price buyouts. That doesn't mean they're going to be right either. We'll have to see. Let's get some more comments in here. Again, I'm not trying to sell anybody on this, by the way. I'm not. I've just also kind of known this has been coming for a while. So I've kind of looked at ways this could work going forward because this doesn't surprise me. I think this is where this has been trending for a long time here. Okay, let's get some more comments. Griffin says, we don't care about culture anymore. We don't care about the state anymore. Most importantly, we don't care about our alumni or fans at all. running with Jason so we win 6 or 7 games next season. What does that really mean long term? Live from Lavender Town says, this is what you said a few weeks back. Fickell will win a few more games next year, so they will get to the point to that as progress, even if they aren't much better as a team. Mediocrity inbound. That is my biggest worry, and Brian Shetty hits on it. Yippee, we can't even get to mediocre next year then. I mean, I think we can get to 6, 7, 8 wins next year. My biggest fear as a Badger fan is getting mediocre. Because if you get in mediocre territory, you never pull yourself out. It's almost better to completely bottom out, which then it forces change. Mediocre is a scary thing for me. Let me tell you, I want your comments and thoughts, just your raw thoughts on this. Tell me if anybody in the chat feels like this is a good idea, bad idea. If someone's in the middle, there's a lot of people frustrated. Let me tell you the one part about this really frustrated me, just off the surface. The one part that really frustrated me, and I'm not trying to be, I'll just say it. And maybe if I wait on a day, or if I think about it for a day or an hour, or maybe I feel differently. Chris McIntosh comes out and does a statement about this, about his announcement through Varsity Connect, Badger Connect, which is, a subscription-based service. Again, I think if you're going to make an announcement like this, go have a press conference and take real questions. Take real questions. I think you owe it to the media and the fans to answer from a broad group of people. I think it's kind of, and this is nothing against Jesse Temple or anything like that. He does incredible work. Jesse Temple's awesome. But I think it's if you're going to come out and make this type of announcement and you're going to try to sell this to your fans, then go up there with a little, again, my opinion, a little more accountability and face reporters from a lot of different places and answer questions and really talk about it and really try to be accountable to the fans. I think, to me, the messaging and the narrative just continues to miss with this program. And I've talked about it a couple of times. I don't think kind of sitting behind a paywall and answering questions to someone who, to a place that probably just has a little bit more vested interest in Wisconsin working is the best way to do this. I think fans, I've said it from the jump, just want accountability. They just want honesty. They want someone to go up there and answer questions for a while, honestly, and address some of the fans' real frustration. I think that could have been handled better. I think this probably should have been a press conference. And if you're going to continue to release messages, make announcements, and have a press conference, that's what you should do as the athletic director, right? As the figurehead of this department, you should go up there and be able to answer questions from people and sit down for 30 minutes and try to, even if you're not trying to sell anybody, at least hear those concerns, questions, and answer them in a broader format. I don't love how this was released. Eagle says it's official. We are a basketball school in men's sports. I listen. Ben says, is money even the issue? Our coaches cannot develop players. Again, this is kind of exactly what I thought the response would be. I do think this team can be better next year. I do think if you have healthy quarterback, you have more NIL money. I do think that makes a difference. Again, I'm also a supremely positive, optimistic guy. That's kind of who I am. I was like 5 seasons into Game of Thrones thinking all the Starks would survive outside of Ned and the older one. I was like, oh, they'll all be fine. So I'm an optimistic guy by nature. That's who I am. And I can see a path for this working. I can see a path for that 24 and 25 talent being successful. You put more money into the program. That's a big part of it. I could also see it not working, and I can see why people want to move on.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Indiana heads to Penn State this weekend as 2 touchdown favorites.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This game was supposed to be a top 5 matchup, Zach Seiko, and now Indiana's cruising as one of the best teams in the country, and Penn State's still looking for their first win in quite some time.
Yeah, that's why I find it really interesting that people are trying to make the argument, or that there's even a semblance, a little bit of confidence that Penn State can pull off this upset. Unless Penn State's making radical changes, which they just continue to show that they're going to stay on this road, that they are afraid to push the envelope. They are afraid to make radical necessary changes, because what are you afraid of at this point in time? You're worried about hurting a transfer's feelings, or you're worried about what bowl invite you may or may not get after the expectations were college football playoff, conference contention, national title contention. Oh, but we can't make these depth chart changes because you got to do something. And so since unless and I always try to do the mental gymnastics that, oh, this is coach speak, or they're trying to keep things close to the vest because they don't want to reveal anything for the opponent. Sure. That's just not the case. I get the sense that Penn State, if everything's status quo, which I fully expect, then Indiana should win, no problem. Do I think it would be a 4 or 5 touchdown deficit? Gosh, I would hope not. But I think 2 touchdowns is fair when it is a home game at Beaver Stadium, and Penn State still does have a healthy, talented players. But at one demoralizing loss after another, I just don't know how much energy Penn State has left to give in this game.
Well, that's kind of what we've talked about from the Indiana side of things. It's like, look, obviously the head coach gets fired, but it is at Beaver Stadium. It's in Happy Valley, and Penn State's still a talented team. Like, the guys haven't just abandoned the team, and they don't have 30 transfers out and things like that. I mean, the team is still intact. It just clearly wasn't working in the system they were operating in. And so I ask you this, Zach. If the Ohio State game had gone the way it did for the first 2 quarters, for 4 quarters, right? If that game had been close down the stretch, would that give Penn State more confidence, or maybe you and the fan base more confidence in this game? Because clearly Indiana's rolling and Penn State is not.
Well, yeah, let's be honest. It would have given them tons of life, I think. If you can go after Ohio State has now rattled off 10 wins in a row against Penn State. 10 wins in a row. So the win.
That's what it is now, 10?
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. So fortunately for Penn State, they don't have to play Ohio State again until 2028. But your question, your point being that, Penn State would have found some life or started to build some momentum. It looked that way after the first half. I mean, it was 17-14. Penn State gets a turnover. All things are at least pointing, hey, Nittany Lions could be, putting an upset together. And then they literally, it was a tale of 2 halves. They fell right back into the same thing that they've been doing, questionable play calls. Ohio State made all the necessary halftime adjustments.
Yeah.
Penn State, it seemed like they either made none or they made ones that were just detrimental. They abandoned everything that was working. And that's my issue, that the changes that you do make and the ones where you're finding success, you say, well, we can't do that because the game script wasn't even out of reach. I'm referring to the fact that Penn State was running jumbo sets with 7 offensive linemen, and Ohio State just had no answer. I mean, sure, again, eventually they were going to challenge it, but Penn State didn't even go back to it because they were down by 10, and they felt like they needed to get into a race with Ohio State. There was plenty of game left. You were down by 10. All you needed was another 15-play, easier said than done, okay? But my point being is that, am I expecting them to do things like that against Indiana? Rotate players in just to see what they can give you? Because you don't know until you actually do it on game day. Okay? Well, the players aren't showing us enough on it. This is what's really frustrating, is the argument is being made that, well, these guys aren't showing us enough on Tuesday's practice, so therefore their playing time's limited on Saturday. You don't know what they can do until they get in the game, for crying out loud. Yeah. I get it. Practice is practice, and that's what you see all the time. But you have to try something. You have to try something different. So I'm saying, if you are not truly going to say, we're all in, we're going crazy, Indiana's not going to know what hit them, then Penn State has no chance in this game.
Even being at home, which is so crazy. And again, what this game was supposed to be, right, was a top 5 matchup, top 10 minimum, but top 5 possibility at Penn State. This could be another chance for both of these teams to build their playoff resume heading down the home stretch. And look,
That's
Yeah,
funny.
right. Yeah, I mean, hey, we're happy to be here, right? But we all know what the situation is. Again, Penn State is really looking for anything. Indiana's looking to avoid the upset as 2 touchdown favorites. And you talk about Penn State going away from what makes them successful and the little bit that they did have against Ohio State. And Indiana knows exactly what they want to do, and they do it every single time. Even in a game against Maryland, they ran the football, and ran it some more. Fernando Mendoza didn't hardly do anything through another interception, but he just turned around and handed the football off and did what they had to do. That's the difference, I think, right now is Indiana has its identity on both sides of the football, and they are going to stick to it because it works. And whether it's throwing the ball, running the ball, or on defense is getting after the quarterback or dropping back in coverage, Indiana knows exactly what they want to do. I do think there is this sort of concern, though, because you just don't know because of the reasons you laid out, Zach. What is Penn State going to do? How are they going to look? What personnel are they going to use? What game plan do they use? What play calling scheme do they come up with? We just simply don't know because it's an interim staff with a bunch of changes, and you just don't know what you're getting into. You can't watch film from the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season because that's not really relevant. So is there a way that this upset could happen? Absolutely. But
Sure.
It would take Penn State playing their best and Indiana probably playing their worst. Would you agree?
That's the same thing as I said for Ohio State, is that eventually, Penn State could have made it fun. They could have, and they did, right? They made it fun for a first half of football, but then eventually talent was going to take over and coaching. I mean, Penn State's coaching staff. Look, I have the utmost respect for Terry Smith as an interim head coach. I don't know what happened to Andy Kotelnicki because that was a top 15 offense to now they're outside of the top 100. I would still like to think that he is somewhat of an offensive guru. But I guess when you don't have the same players, when you don't have Tyler Warren, it all falls apart. And then Jim Knowles, hey, if you don't have 5-star talent all across the field, is he even that good of a coordinator? So Indiana, even if they get into a close situation and Penn State's, building some confidence, building some momentum down the stretch, we're in it, man. We can, and that's how Northwestern, UCLA, they were able down the stretch, they built that belief like, oh, we're in it, we're here. But at that point in time, Indiana's just going to be able to out-talent and out-coach Penn State down the stretch. So even if this is a close game, I really don't see it where Indiana, could this be close? Sure, but kind of the same thing with Ohio State. I'm not expecting a win here whatsoever. If they cover, great. I am no wins for Penn State this weekend.